promising student vanished from her home in the dead of night, leaving absolutely no trace. As police quickly launched a search, a chilling truth began to emerge. Investigators meticulously pieced together the details, ultimately uncovering a story that would shock the entire nation. Eve Carson, born in Athens, Georgia, on November 19, 1985, distinguished herself early on as incredibly driven and focused. During her high school years, she served as vice president of the student council, dedicated her time to volunteering at both a nursing home and a shelter for abused teens, worked as a congressional page, and even assisted in a stem cell research lab, all while managing her studies. After graduating with honors, Eve enrolled at the University of North Carolina, pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her exceptional academic achievements earned her a prestigious scholarship, and she rapidly ascended as a campus leader, taking on pivotal roles in various student organizations. But her commitment didn't stop there. Eve continued her charitable endeavors, even teaching science at an elementary school. She also traveled internationally for volunteer work, spending a summer in Ecuador assisting doctors, studying for a semester in Cuba, and joining a research team in Egypt. Clearly, Eve stood out as one of her university's most remarkable students. She harbored ambitious goals for her future and was steadily working toward them. Even before graduation, she had secured a job offer from a major company, planning to kickstart her career soon after earning her degree. In February, 22-year-old Eve was in her final year of college, living off campus with a close group of friends. On the night of March 5, around 1:30 a.m., her roommates were heading out to a party. They invited Eve to join, but she politely declined, opting instead to stay in and study for her upcoming classes. Her friends left without her and didn't return until approximately 4:30 in the morning. Upon their return, Eve's friends immediately sensed that something was amiss. The front door stood wide open, lights blazed inside, yet Eve was nowhere to be found, nor was her car. It simply didn't make sense. Why would Eve leave in the middle of the night, and why leave the door ajar? They tried calling her, but she didn't answer. Still, they hoped an unexpected situation had arisen, forcing her to leave suddenly, so they waited, expecting her to return. However, by the next day, Eve remained missing. That's when one of Eve's friends decided it was time to contact the police and report her disappearance. After hearing the details, investigators shared a chilling piece of information. Earlier that morning, they had discovered the body of a young woman whose identity remained unknown. They showed Eve's friend a photo of the victim, and she instantly recognized it as Eve. It turned out that around 5 a.m., shortly after Eve vanished, police had received a call from a woman living about a mile from Eve's home. She had been abruptly awakened by the sound of gunshots followed by a terrifying scream. Alarmed and uncertain of what was happening, she called the authorities. When officers arrived, they found a young woman's body lying on the ground with no identification, no phone, and nothing to help identify her. The only detail they could confirm then was that she had been shot multiple times. Once Eve's friend confirmed her identity, detectives interviewed her roommates and began to piece together a rough timeline. At 1:30 a.m., Eve was studying at home, but by 5 a.m., her body was discovered just a mile away. The pressing question became, how did she end up there, and who was responsible? Since her car was also missing, investigators quickly suspected a robbery. This theory gained weight when a search of her room revealed her wallet and credit cards were gone. They weren't found anywhere near the body either. Medical examiners confirmed no signs of sexual assault, ruling that out as a motive. Checking her phone records, police saw her last signal came from a cell tower near a highway just outside town, but the phone itself was never recovered. It seemed the killer had discarded it somewhere in the woods. Then, detectives received their first significant lead. A car matching Eve's description was discovered abandoned just a few miles from her home. Authorities promptly sent the vehicle to forensics for fingerprinting and DNA testing. Meanwhile, detectives made another important discovery. Forensic experts examined Eve's computer, the one she used for studying, and found it had been active until about 3:30 a.m. This indicated she was still at home for at least 2 hours after her friends had left for the party. Only after that did she somehow end up a mile away, where her body was eventually found. By then, news of Eve's murder had spread throughout the city, leaving her college campus in shock. Almost everyone knew her. She was deeply involved in nearly every major student organization. The community couldn't believe she was gone. Along with the sorrow came a growing sense of fear. People worried for their own safety, and the lack of solid leads from the police only amplified their anxiety. As a result, detectives were inundated with tips. Students reported anything even remotely suspicious in hopes of aiding the investigation. However, despite the influx of information, none of the leads brought the authorities any closer to cracking the case. Then, investigators received a crucial breakthrough. Since it appeared the killer had taken Eve's credit cards, police examined her transaction history, and what they uncovered was significant. Just 18 minutes after Eve last used her computer, someone withdrew $700 from her account through 2 separate transactions. Attempts to withdraw more money were blocked due to the daily limit. The ATM used was located near a shopping center on the far side of town. Detectives immediately requested the security footage, and as hoped, they got a clear match. The footage revealed a man sitting inside Eve's car, using her card at the ATM. In the back seat, another person appeared to be present. Investigators suspected it might have been Eve herself, but the image quality was too poor to confirm. Forensic experts tried to enhance the video for a clearer look, but their efforts proved unsuccessful. Meanwhile, police discovered that the suspect had attempted to use Eve's card at multiple other ATMs across the city, though none of those machines were equipped with surveillance cameras. This pattern continued until March 7, when authorities received another alert about an attempted withdrawal. Around 12:30 a.m., the suspect showed up at a 24-hour convenience store and tried to use the ATM, but the bank declined the transaction. Officers hurried to the store, which was in a neighboring town, and this location had a functioning security camera. Reviewing the footage from that night, they saw someone attempting to use Eve's card, but in a surprising twist, it was not the same man seen in the earlier ATM video. Investigators now had to entertain the possibility that more than one person was involved in Eve's murder or that the killer had handed her card off to an accomplice. They tried to identify the second suspect, but like before, the surveillance footage was too grainy to make a clear match. So, detectives turned to the public for assistance, releasing both images from the security cameras to the media in hopes that someone might recognize the individuals. Since the case had already drawn widespread attention in the community, the police station was soon flooded with tips, yet none of these leads brought authorities any closer to apprehending Eve's killer. Everything changed on March 12 when an anonymous caller came forward with a promising tip. The caller claimed to recognize the man in the second surveillance video from the convenience store and identified him as Demario Atwater. Detectives began investigating Atwater's background and uncovered some troubling details. At only 21 years old, he already had an extensive criminal history, including multiple arrests for robbery, assault, drug offenses, and other crimes. Although he had served time in jail, he had also been released early on several occasions. They also discovered that just 2 days after Eve's murder, Demario was scheduled to appear in court for carrying a handgun while on probation. Authorities reviewed old mug shots of Atwater and matched them against the convenience store footage, confirming the striking resemblance. It was clear they had the right person. Furthermore, they learned Demario lived close to the store, prompting detectives to go straight to his residence. During questioning, Demario denied any involvement in the murder, but the surveillance video provided enough cause to take him into custody. As the investigation continued, police discovered that Demario was frequently communicating with a 17-year-old named Lawrence Lovett, who already had his own criminal record despite his young age. When detectives reviewed Lawrence's mug shot, they immediately recognized him as the person driving Eve's car in the first ATM footage. However, unlike Demario, Lawrence resisted arrest, barricading himself inside his home and forcing law enforcement to call in SWAT. When officers finally apprehended him, Lawrence also denied any involvement. Both suspects were then charged and held in custody awaiting trial. With neither suspect willing to cooperate, investigators focused on building their case through other means. Cell phone data revealed something significant. On the night of Eve's murder, both suspects' phones connected to a cell tower near her neighborhood, despite them living in a different city. Detectives suspected that Demario and Lawrence randomly targeted Eve, simply searching for someone to rob and noticing she was home alone late at night. Based on the ATM withdrawals, it appears they forced her to drive with them to several locations where she handed over her card. After hitting the $700 daily withdrawal limit, they took her to a wooded area on the outskirts of town, where they ultimately murdered her. Given the brutality of the crime, prosecutors declared their intention to pursue the death penalty for Demario. Lawrence's situation was more complex. Since he was a minor, the harshest penalty he faced was life imprisonment. Aware that the evidence might not be strong enough to secure a conviction alone, prosecutors made a calculated offer to DeMario: plead guilty in exchange for removing the death penalty threat. DeMario accepted the deal and confessed that he and Lawrence went out that night planning to commit a robbery and make quick money. He explained that Lawrence had called him, suggesting they target someone on the university campus. While driving through a neighborhood, they noticed Eve through a window in her house, and that's when they acted. Armed with their guns, they broke in and forced her into her own car. They then drove to several ATMs, attempting to withdraw as much money as possible. Throughout the ordeal, Eve pleaded with them to let her go, promising she wouldn't say a word, she just wanted to get home. But they had different plans. According to DeMario, they decided to kill her because she had seen their faces, despite them never trying to conceal them. Ultimately, they took her to a deserted street and shot her multiple times with 2 guns. DeMario also shared something deeply heartbreaking. Just before they killed her, Eve asked them to pray with her. Instead of showing any mercy, they coldly shot her down. In April 2010, 2 years after the murder, DeMario was found guilty. Thanks to his plea deal, the judge sentenced him to life in prison instead of the death penalty, plus an additional 30 years. After the verdict, DeMario turned to Eve's parents, apologized for his actions, and admitted he deserved the punishment he received. Meanwhile, Lawrence refused to plead guilty, and his trial began in December 2011. Despite his lawyer's attempts to prove his innocence, DeMario's confession, along with the overwhelming evidence, led to Lawrence being found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But his story didn't end there. In 2013, the State Court of Appeals overturned Lawrence's sentence, referencing a separate ruling that deemed life without parole for juvenile offenders excessively harsh and unnecessary. Consequently, he was granted a new trial. This time, Lawrence was more outspoken, telling the court that everyone makes mistakes, and insisting he wasn't the monster people thought he was. Despite this, he showed little genuine remorse, and ultimately, the judge again sentenced him to life in prison. It's also important to mention that Lawrence was a suspect in another chillingly similar case. In January 2008, just months before Eve's murder, a 29-year-old student was broken into and killed in his apartment. Following the murder, money was withdrawn from the victim's account at various ATMs throughout the city. However, authorities never secured enough evidence to link Lawrence to that crime, and the charges were eventually dropped. Eve's case not only captured national attention but also sparked meaningful change. In February, North Carolina legislators enacted a new law that introduced harsher penalties and more rigorous procedures for individuals involved in gang-related offenses. This law took effect on December 1 and applies to all crimes committed from that date onward. The legislation was directly inspired by the tragedy that befell Eve. At her university, a scholarship was established in her honor, and a memorial garden was created on campus to preserve her memory. In February 2009, one of Eve's close friends became a finalist on American Idol. While performing on stage, he shared how Eve's death motivated him to take a chance and audition. He expressed that without Eve, he never would have found the courage or determination to pursue his dream. This case truly highlights the devastating impact of random acts of violence. What do you think is the most crucial takeaway from Eve's tragic story? If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.